Tired and alone, like a machine. The archetype of the glowing citizen. Welcome to tonight's episode. René Descartes was this French philosopher who spoke about the mind-body dualism. Gilbert Ryle kind of gave a description of his mind-body dualism as the ghost in the machine in his book called The Concept of Mind. The notion of the ghost in the machine is a suggestion of consciousness's untouchable aspect. I remember this concept of ghost in the machine has been with me for a while, and I have wondered about it to a degree where in one of my earlier talks, very early in 2014, I remember I spoke about how the machine is not in the ghost is not in the machine can also be in the ghost. That means reality can have a totally purely mental origin, and it can have a totally purely material origin. Now, based on the consideration of each point of this, systems begin to activate. The container of karma takes shape. For a long time, I wondered what is the most evident part of this ghost in the machine, and when I closed my eyes to wonder about it, it was more like a kind of in a landscape of memory. That means I'm pretty sure every person, to some degree, sees variously different designs behind their eyes, but the atmosphere seems the same. This is why, for me, I kind of realized we shouldn't think spirituality is the opposite of matter. We should not think per se that the next kind of enlightening steps of civilization have to do with escaping the material domain. Far as the emotions permit the thoughts to manifest. The human being is also an emotional creature. You might not believe it, but the emotions arise from a sort of temperature. That means you won't believe how much your temperature changes, your psychology will change. And so emotions is in some sense the consciousness trying to maintain various simulations of self within one moment. And sometimes as they pile up, I sometimes see emotions as imagine you put like 12 books on top of each other, And that sight you get once you get on top of those is the emotion. And the emotion has to do, I find, with the layers of the various moments that the mind chose to manifest. You see, we tend to think that we are an object. Holy shit, how do we have subjects in our mind just floating? And then we think that we are a hallucination of matter. Our thinking is so primitive. It's as if we go from A to B to C to D, thinking that's the only order that civilization must glance through. There is there's something known as finding the love of your species. I find what the issue is not per se only resource allocation. It's kind of like issue many people with vast movements on the planet, both good and bad, have had. For example, Karl Marx in his communism, he was kind of, there was a sort of undertone of an altruistic intent for the world, as if he found a sort of equality, but he realized that the nature of the person had not evolved to a point to be able to maintain that equality. That means it's not man that is corrupt. It's not that people are evil. It's just that we evolved from savageness. Just like the ancient Greeks said, in some sense, the first god was Kronos. The universe started from chaos. Chaos had children of order who then defeated the chaos, for such as Zeus. So what that means is the psychology was ascribed to a chaotic environment. It's as if the attention entered the manifest body to devour, you know. There is a story by this very profound mystic Sufi by the name of Hafiz, and it's in one of his poems. And he writes the story where, in some one night, with the eyes of his heart, Hafiz suddenly sees there's this poor, back in the day. This is like the stories from 700, 900 years ago in ancient, like in and what happens in the East, and what happens is that Hafiz suddenly sees that there is a slave who's ran away from a house. Keep in mind, the story is from long ago. And this slave has gone into a cave and has started praying to God. God, save me from this hell. Don't let them come and take me back into this hell. This guy is just praying nonstop. And somehow the eyes of the heart of Hafiz pick up on this. As he opens his eyes, as if the divine will has already spoken in his ear, Hafiz looks at his disciple and says, there's a task for you. He gives the guy the exact address and tells the guy the story that there's a bewildered kind of slave there, you know? And you have to go get him and bring him here so we save him, because he's going to get found out and all this. But Hafiz tells his disciple one thing, and he says, but you are not allowed to say a single word to this man. You have to just bring him here. And the guy's like, what if he doesn't want to come? He's like, you have to. And so the disciple sets on the road, and Hafiz again takes a seat in the eyes of his heart. And what happens is the disciple follows the address, being like, this is next level stuff, you know. The disciple suddenly gets to the cave and sees the exact description of the man there. He gets shocked, as if there's something unique about this moment. And he goes forth and he's about to say, hey man, I'm here to save you. Suddenly he sees he can't say a single thing. And there's this complete, like, out of respect for Hafez, the man cannot say a single word. And he's there with this kind of emotional chaos. That means it was a dark night for the emotional soul, at least for that disciple. And so what happened is the disciple goes, and suddenly the eyes of the slave doesn't know this guy's here to save him. He thinks this guy's there, has come here to take him back. And the slave shouts and screams and hesitates and tries not to. But the guy, officer, said, you have to bring this man back. We have to free him. As if it's a command from the will of the beloved, as Hafiz would say. The disciple is a very kind person, but he has to listen to the instruction, and he ties the guy's hand and ties it to the horse, and there he's going, and the whole time the guy is shouting, God, don't take me to hell, please. Like the servant's going insane out of the fear of returning to the inefficient. At the same time, the slave is too bewildered to notice, but there is tears coming down from the eyes of this disciple. And he suddenly realizes what the lesson of the moment was, what Hafiz wanted him to see from the moment. That there are moments in life that like that disciple was saying to himself, he wished he could just speak, but he couldn't. He had to respect the pledge, and it was like that moment where the disciple in his mind said, "You don't realize how close your heaven is." And the story was, to be honest, at least, and based on any tradition who gets access to the story. Stories are universal, by the way. They But anyways, the whole idea was that sometimes in life we think it's like we're going through the rough. We think it's like the film The Gray, you know. We may feel like Liam Neeson. But the idea is that just keep going. It unfolds as you make decisions and actions. And the mind is such a multidimensional phenomena. You know, to be honest, when I give these titles, sometimes the whole title is inspired out of an image, just an instant image I see. And I remember there was a moment where it was as if sometimes the emotion is so intense in certain moments, it just enters the long-term memory. You can't forget it. Now what happens is, to be honest, I remember kind of passing this food court, and I don't remember where it was, but I was passing, like I was in this kind of like mall, passing in this food court, and I'll never forget, I saw this man, and he had his briefcase, and he had his stuff from work, but his clothing was very simple, t-shirt and jeans, you know, and of course he was overweight, but it was as if I could just see him waiting in the line of that fast food place. I think it was KFC or something. And I could just see how that KFC was the best part of his day. And I'm like, oh my God, the reason people are found in certain kind of cycles is because we are emotionally deciding after we have had access to all the ideological design-based stuff. That means there is some unknown movement that is required in the moment for it to feel anew. You know, they say, Freud says, God is dad. Friedrich Nietzsche says God is dead. Mr.Within would say God is language. God is language. And the utility of phenomena really brings it into life, you know. I remember in that instant, it was as if the civilization is so inefficient. Do you know? It is so inefficient that sometimes it breaks my heart because it makes me feel as if it's being run by a machine. It's the sometimes there's two types of sadness. There is a sadness of the future that could of the past that kinda is gone, and there is a sadness of a potential for a future that is never attempted, and that sadness irritates me. That sorrow irritates me. There was a question on this philosophy exam where the teacher's like, all right, I'm gonna blow these kids' minds, you know, the philosophy teacher. And he puts a question where the whole question is WHY question mark, why? And so many kids give different answers. One of them's like, oh my God, it's like this. And one of them's like, because of God. One of them's like, because of evolution. And they just keep on going, different answers, different answers, different answers. But none of the kids got that extra bonus point, except one. And when the kids confronted the teacher's like, only one person got it right. And the teacher asked that kid to stand up and speak. And that kid suddenly says the answer is why not? Do you see? It's a full counter. That means in moments of stress, you know, psychological weakness, that means you think you're a weak character in a story. That is a. Sometimes you can just take off the jacket of obsessive self belief. I find too much confidence is dangerous. I'm telling you. Too much confidence is no longer confidence, it's conquering. It's like confidence that has changed to conquering. At the edge of the confident person, there's a conqueror. You know, it's you can say the simplest thing, that life for humanity on an individual level is just awareness to action. Now, that action can be navigated by various factors of attention. But the thing is that if the person considers their existence in the moment to be on one dimension, the objective dimension, and considers that their mind to be in a sort of subjective experiential dimension, that means there's either a viewpoint that existence is experience, and in some sense, there's a view that existence and experience are separate. And for me, I thought they were the same. I suddenly realized they never could be the same. Then I witnessed both in an attributeless moment. Then I realized change has been given the most freedom. So you see, after you live for yourself, you'll notice the unknown world that that known self arose from. And when you rediscover the unknown, it's literally realizing as if your head was in a box most of your life and you weren't just alert. To be alert means you have to be aware of not only yourself and your state and maintain that, but also to be aware of your world, of what's going on out there, outside the windows of your eyes. The reason I'm speaking about it, to be honest, metaphysics, and especially the notions of enlightenment, they were things that the unknown would move the person. That means it was so intuitive that it wasn't like it was a journey within. That's why it's only your eyes can do it. It's like you're alone on this. Many things in life, there's collaborative processes. Even if the person chooses not to do anything, life will eventually engage what it requires. There is a strange wisdom to nature where it makes no sense and its movement is so chaotic, but its outcomes and consequences are perfect. It's like the drunken master when I look at nature, kind of chaos's magnificent order, you know? It's as if what built order? The hands of chaos. What built chaos? The hands of order. You know, the notion of evil and justice to be partners of the same moment. This doesn't mean a nullification of what is right and wrong. It just means that our minds are multidimensional. And when we understand this, we are free to use it. What you cannot observe, you can't do anything about. The same way you are innocent, as like you see a child who doesn't know anything about society is so innocent, like if it makes a mistake, like a super young child. The same way you can say the whole cosmos would look at man and be like, this man knows nothing. The human being thinks it knows. It endlessly simulates bubbles of various realities that are real, and suddenly it snaps out of those bubbles, you know? Do you know how hard it is to be on a rock in the middle of nowhere and to be certain about something? That's not an easy task. At most, it's just based on the levels of perception accessible. Now, these levels depend on internally how the mind has categorized itself. So I consider every person had to put down an axis on the world. It's just that that axis was put down in their youth before they were a subjective self. That means you have lived the person is the personality is a gift, but it's a gift of the moment, and once you open it, it changes. That's it. To be honest, you want the greatest. It's as if this was the flaw in psychology. I find that the greatest the greatest therapy that externality could be is just to be a listener. That means it's how can I tell you? Sometimes there is it's kind of like an artist drawing on a canvas, suddenly wanting to draw the design bigger, but realizing the edge of the canvas. And once you realize the edge of the canvas, that means this mind that is endlessly seeking success like a hungry animal suddenly realizes, whoa, it's too big. The system is too big. So then the mind has to choose what to do. Now, what I noticed is that people who have attained a sort of individual success, they then want to be heroes. It's the whole philanthropist initiative of billionaires. Do you know? So it's as if the heroic vision is becoming relevant. It's like the mind is setting itself as a high value position that can also give value. You see, I will ask you, tell me which, I'll give you two versions of two types of kings. You tell me which king you think is more of a true king. One king defeats his enemy, and his enemy, in some sense, or let me say it like this. Let me give a better example. One king rules with fear, the other king rules with freedom. Obviously, the king that rules with freedom will have a more intelligent kingdom than the king that doesn't. It's strange, but it's because there is so many of us, it's unavoidable the collective purpose. However, the issue is the collective purpose has not come into position. It has not come into a framework. It's kind of about quality control. I find that's what mindfulness kind of brings. It brings a question that was never asked before. that we are so worked up about the future that people, without realizing it, are entering inefficient systems, never realizing that the system won't update unless some action is done. So what I mean by that is that it's like if you're trying to fit in to a system, you are missing out on the total possibility to like redesign the system. When you're trying to fit into the past, don't expect the future to find you. I find the greatest wisdom is the realization of how empty-handed consciousness is. Attention in space has no story. Something I do is that the mind gives the person a permission to simulate the opposite of what it is entertaining. I'll give you an example. It's as if I look at a room where there is a light in it. Like I see a candle in the room, and my mind instantly visualizes the room being completely dark. Now, trying to visualize death is kind of like while the candle is lit, trying to visualize what darkness would be. But eventually the person would realize that the darkness is there, the light is in movement. So it's kind of like the being trying to at first transcend something, trying to go beyond the system, but then realizing, no, the system is just waiting for new input. That's the next duty of the next generations. They just have to have the willingness and the strength to communicate their inner realities. We are all living lives that are in the shadows of conscious thought. I find I think people in the world will be divided into these two schools of thought. Ones who are trying to endlessly continue the objective realm, ones who are trying to endlessly continue the subjective realm, and beyond these two, you're not a person. Any movement and intelligence beyond these domains, beyond the domain of a self and beyond the domain of a world, it literally leaves the pattern of individual consciousness. What that means is rather than people thinking it's a oneness, it is the stepping out of a vehicle of a dualistic relationship with the moment. The only freedom is the one that was always there. The whole truth is a riddle. I'm telling you, the fact that people are looking for truth, I understand that, but not realizing that every moment's texture is just present. It's a present experience. It's like, where else can truth be? Where else can your eyes go? That's why the moment demands a new exploration. It's like nature is bowing to man. If the animals could speak, they would not be scolding mankind. If the animals could speak, they would say, return to nature, O wise ones, return to nature. Do not forget that we have to maintain the balance between heaven and earth, and it is so remarkable. I am so the honor of origin. Once you feel that battlefield, then you will understand what the independence of the soul is not dependent on any condition. It is like kind of wondering what's it's as if like the greatest movement of a thought was to become the mover of thought. You know, it's like the greatest evolutionary ability of whatever this intelligence is of our consciousness. It chose to stand up and open its eyes. It chose to behave differently. Therefore, it became in one dimension its own God, its own creator. But then it also realized, regardless of how much the human being felt it was a God to himself or herself, the person suddenly realizes the unknown movements of nature. That means it's as if this is a kind of resolution to the cosmic solitude, that once one basks in that solitude, there comes a moment where thought, it doesn't surrender. It's just the emotions no longer touch your thoughts, and your thoughts no longer are you. So you are an observer of movement. And what observes movement? It is still. And because that stillness is attributeless, one of the easiest things to say about it is that it's a field of intelligence. Where does attention lead? To a sort of childlike jumping up and down in the unknown and known until it learns to sit. And when you learn to sit, that means you learn to accept the unknown slowly. And when you accept the unknown, you are no longer bound by thought. It's strange. It's as if the worst thought, any sort of thought can appear to you, but it comes and goes. As Chung Tzu says, it's like thoughts are like leaves on a tree. They change in the season. They don't need to even be responded to at times. Do you know, if a person had to react to every thought they had, do you know how unbelievably ridiculous and silly the person would be? Creatures that must be aware, as we are, of like a squirrel jumping from the branches, of like how neurons moving, and various synapses occurring to some degree, be also the thought. Because then this whole issue, it's all about sensitivity to language and what a person feels they want to leave behind. Because to be honest, there's no such thing as success if you go up the mountain alone. It's kind of like the story of Guru Padmasambhava. This man was so enlightened, it's like there's some intense stories about him where they're like as if this person would go and certain villages and towns had droughts. And these droughts were because of certain beings. And Guru Padmasambhava was this enlightened being that was elementally kind of in another dimension, like handling these beings and kind of converting them to Buddhism. He was converting the subjective realm to Buddhism. Like that's some next level thing. That's kind of like some, excuse my language, but Pure Land wisdom. I wanted to say something else, but wisdom. Failure is a strange moment of developing strength. I don't know why. I think it's because the person loses, and when they lose, it's empty. And they just look at the empty, and after a while, they're like, oh man, it's still empty. And then after a little bit while, they're like, okay, the empty is getting boring. The eternally attributeless is not relevant to the conceptual dimension. You don't forget to live the life of an individual in a collective system, but at the same time, you don't limit yourself from experiencing collective movements that influence the individual system. Because the nature of mind, it beams out. I don't know how to tell you, your presence, your attention, it's like certain teachings are like you can write them down in books and teach them in classrooms. Certain things have to do with the will of the student to see that if they took a new step, where would they be? To be honest, it's the inspiration of wonder, because I'm like, okay, Galileo, there's a quote Galileo has where he says, you can never actually teach anyone anything. You can just make them realize it within themselves. And what that really means is, like, sometimes the question is more inspiring than just an answer. I don't believe our civilization needs answers. That's why I'm like, this whole truth-seeking thing should get slowed down, but the meaning and the definition should change. It's like, even in psychology, this is an exercise where the guy says something like, wonder what else the word, for example, saving means. Imagine somebody has a savior complex. And so the psychologist says something like, what does the word savior mean to you? Trying to go to the core of what image began the thought process. You can say words are I don't know how to say it, but it's we are as at the peak of our knowledge, we become students of the unknown. That unknown is not per se an image, it's not a story, it's a trust in your moment that you just can't carry on. It's as if somebody told you, hey man, stop meditating on like a candlelight, or stop meditating on that shrine. Just chill for a moment and meditate on how your moment of being is being everything for you. For a moment, learn to see yourself not just only in the mirror. Learn to acknowledge your mind. Because every person's mind, it's like it has hidden treasures in it. And these hidden treasures are literally the recalibration of their worldview to a new, you can say, subjective freedom of experience. By the way, if anybody has questions about what I'm saying, you can always share. Let's say right now our eyes opened for the first time and we found ourselves in a new moment. I'm just going to entertain, I'm just going to go with the flow here. Let's say you find yourself in a completely new moment. That means you literally look at where you are, you look at your body, where it's existing. You look at the room or whatever environment you're in. You look at what's here. And you notice that various shapes, various designs, and you see upon these designs, there's also subjective designs imposed. These subjective designs have become so experientially, like the experience linked the past experience to the concept to the new experience found in a new context. There was this incredible Native American poet, and I forget her name. And I hope if somebody knows, I mean, I'm probably not going to remember the quote verbatim, but the concept and the image that was shared in that quote was beautiful. It was like this voice of this kind of like woman walking in the woods, and suddenly it was as if she realized she wasn't alone, and all her ancestors were there behind her. And just take into this consideration that it doesn't matter. It's just when the eyes of the invisible other fall upon the ego feels it is the king of revelation. It has seen. It the ego feels it knows everything. And the moment the ego feels it knows everything, it is as if Titanic, the story of Titanic begins for that ego. For that perspective. Because really all perspectives they are the result of the past changing, and it's like if the past is changing and the present is just here and the future hasn't arrived, it's like what is this categorization, what is this segmentation, what if it's just a moment and all interpretation, whether subjective or not. I think that true intelligence only arises when there is an experiential importance in the moment. When something is important for you, it's like forget law of attraction. The universe is just watching that next design. It's like the hopes and love of millions brought us here. And we take it so for granted. It's ridiculous. It's because the explorer's spirit has been cut down. I'm telling you, it's the pillar of civilization, it's the exploration pillar. This pillar must be protected by whatever you think, whether you're good, bad, whatever kind of character you think you are, and whatever value of a story you have, you know? You have to protect the ability of the unknown's presence. It's like this is one thing that humanity cannot let go of, because if it does, it's like an avalanche. His imagination will collapse. The unknown is what keeps the unknown is the foundation of knowledge. Once the person realizes this, how would you treat yourself then? It's like what ideology would you use as a mask? What story would you want to tell? You become the silent presence of the cosmos that couldn't go anywhere else. Guru Padmasambhava would go on these long walks as if he would suddenly get a vision and start traveling, and it's as if he would suddenly arrive at a moment where there was a sort of hostility or something chaotic happening, or a war. And it was as if he was not just hearing the sounds of the material composition of the world. It was as if it was a hidden symphony. Maybe it was like that, maybe Beethoven saw that hidden symphony. That hidden symphony was not on piano keys. That hidden symphony was nature's living expression. Once that becomes art for you, you, my friend, have entered a sort of paradise of genius. Endless designs, because the emotions no longer resist what is there. We take things too seriously as a species, therefore we get defined by the programs that we have. Survival doesn't give us a way out. It's like you want to smile in a bad system or frown in a good system. I think frowning in a good system is better. Because eventually the system, because its nature is good, it means it cares for progress. It cares for advancement. Political correctness is something that it's as if many kings in history are just shaking their heads with tears in their eyes. It's as if man had a position in the unknown, but he has collapsed and fallen because the one common language broke. We were creatures of pure experience. The field of intelligence had not yet solidified, manifested. So it was as if pure mind, as if every person's deepest memory is like one universal mind or something. Like, it's like, the tree, all the trees are in the soil, It's kind of like we're all on a giant turtle's back. Civilization is on a giant turtle's back, and that turtle's called language. Language is so important. It's like any person who becomes a linguist just cares for how sounds are causing peace and war, how thoughts and the sequencing of ideology, the imagery imposed, the nature of the person, the honesty with the personal dimensions, the honesty with the impersonal dimensions, the tolerance with the inner dimensions, the tolerance with the outer dimensions. These are very crucial because it means you're learning to stand as the unconditional self. And the unconditional self, it's like, sure, if you see synchronicity, okay, let's clap like it's someone's birthday. The mind surpasses its own expectations towards the unfathomable, for evolution commands the new. It's no longer the past. You don't touch the past, you honor the past. That means it's like I am totally down for this whole universal mentality that the elders of civilization must be held in high regard, as if they've literally ran more laps around the sun, So in some sense means it's like treat your own future properly. That's what it means when you see like a senior citizen. You should try to be the angel of their moment. What I mean by that is kind intent, like help. It's like, here's the thing, we're all like, here, I'm just going to declare this. I acknowledge every person who's listening to these talks as advanced communicators and pilots of consciousness. Now, pilots of consciousness, I'm not going to talk about in this talk. too much, you know. But I want to give this idea that there is the pilot. Imagine there's a pilot, me and you right now are the stewards. We are the hostesses. And imagine what that means is me and you are in a plane of existence, and we are conscious that it is being piloted. So it's like we're no longer worried about the direction, the outcome, and then we're just looking at how the passengers on this plane of existence are living. I feel it should just be the mentality of like a codependent responsibility of all classes of man's kind of experience of living. I find the airport metaphor will save us as a civilization. We should design this civilization like an airport. That means it's like an airport where various destinations, various systems are present. They're no longer just attaching themselves to a certain color of land. It's like, okay, for how long can you like claim dirt as your own? You see, nature is here. It's alive. That's what we forget. I was blessed to be foolish enough to see this in my youth. The hidden heartbeat of nature that is like it arises through literally the advanced communicator, which is the steward. It realizes it's about inner reality's relationship with the outer. So it's like the next level of mastery. So if let's say very profoundly in the future, let's say eventually people imagine this, right? That there would be extraterrestrial contact. Now that if that extraterrestrial came down, imagine let's say an extraterrestrial came down right now, right? That extraterrestrial would wonder of our capacity of intelligence. Let's say the extraterrestrial is a little bit more aware than us, okay? That extraterrestrial would see kind of like the human being that is aware of not just how self is creating the world, but is also aware of how the world is being the self, has a sort of unique intelligence than the person that is just lost in self being the world. I find the emotions must bow and move aside. I find the thoughts must bow and move aside. I feel all the significant patterns, even the hidden. It's as if it's a moment where the conscious mind shouts at the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind suddenly notices that there is nothing left. When the conscious has realized it is the unconscious, the subconscious has fulfilled its duty. It no longer exists. There's so much to explore behind our eyes, and that means I hope the future generations don't forget about writing. Writing is the most divine thing. It is the mind's exercise. Like legit, the mind is moving the body in accordance to ideological patterns. We are piloting through subjective clouds and the objective program of nature. It's so much like a program. You know, there's something chaotic about a program too. It's like the loop and the repetition. It's like a part of me really, I believe it was since my childhood, it's like did not like repetition and just things going in a cycle. But it's like I had to come into terms with nature. So it's as if it's like when you see how you are on the shoulder of a giant, and you realize that giant is on the shoulder of a giant. and there's another giant, and it goes ad infinitum. Then it's as if, what do you fear? You're on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and language was sparked like fire. It's kind of like a man-made world inside a non-man-made world. So, anyways, guys, I feel I can end the talk here. And actually, no, I got to talk about the glowing citizen. The glowing citizen, it's this kind of, I felt it was an idea that held archetypal value, and it's just like in an inefficient system, at the bottom of the greatest inefficiency, there is a site that still stands and waits. And it's strange for me how many people have incredible minds and yet they just stand. It's like when you realize there's how many things there are that you want in this world, you'll after some point realize the impossibility of your desire, because the desire with a visualization and imagination can be anything. I feel inevitably it would be a playful resolution because of the amount of change that occurs the moment you want to personify with a certain characteristic of the moment. It's too silent, it's too still. It moves beyond the language threshold, and at some point, the pilot, the only way he can enter that atmosphere is he has to eject from the plane of existence, or he has to, in some sense, land the plane of existence somewhere. That means it's like you're obligated by your biological programming to kind of continue on. Your DNA has a sort of life journey it has to go through. But meanwhile, as that is occurring, there's also the presence of the collective field. Now, the presence of the collective field means how much is the mind willing is to see that what is the common denominator, what every person shares in common, is that black abyss behind their eyes, the void. Emptiness unites us as creatures of manifestation, this inborn value that something is here and it could also not be, you know. Because you don't understand, guys, the concept of death and transition is a very intense concept. It is the suggestion that the breath can redirect itself beyond the biological framework at any moment. The attention can become space in any moment. It is space on some level. It's just that it has been space so long that it has dared to be an illusion in the illusion is a simulation in the truth. The machine is in the machine is in the ghost, and the ghost is not a ghost. The ghost is a suggestion of the unknown. And if we, it's kind of like they say, if you run too egotistically towards mysticism, like with with the same curiosity that killed the cat, it's like my father told me the story of a man he knew, a friend of his, that had decided to do the Sufi kind of walking on coal exercise, on burning coal. And this person had some sort of karmic inefficiency. And my father said my father was like, don't do this. It's like the guy was getting signs like he shouldn't, but his ego felt it was divine, so it wanted to prove itself to itself endlessly as if it's divine. But really, it's like it's inevitable contentment with presence. The guy walks on the coal and he meditates and does his kind of concentration practice, and he goes on the coal and he walks, and suddenly there's one person who's in the next level, and he goes and he stands, and this guy's feet is burning. It's as if the meditation was not enough to contemplate the reality of a consequence. The mind is powerful, but it is not the only data required to make a decision. It's strange. It's kind of like with the same intention with the same attention that our ancestors made tools and built things. With the same attention, one can also build in the subjective realm. But I find because emotions filter, emotions are like the older sister of thought. It's a kind of guidance. It's a sort of emotions guide thoughts. And if you understand your emotions, they are hidden thoughts that were left unacknowledged. The reason I kind of feel like I need to share this is because I feel there's going to be a kind of, it's going to be hilarious, but on some level, this chaotic mass panic of the realization of the meaningless. And so what that means is nobody likes the number zero if it's before any other number. You know? We like the number zero when it's on the right side of the number. So what I mean by that is we don't like to see the void as a manifest creature, but we cannot ignore it. And so that's why this whole here and now, being the present moment kind of Buddhist ideology was just there to show that, okay, your every day's happening once. Now, what are you going to do? And I find it's just find the most advanced technology in your environment and advance your species somehow. It's too big. It's not a one-man job. It's like a 8 billion person job and growing. In 2019, I can say bodies have evolved to minds, and minds have evolved beyond bodies. And so the next language is of a geometrical integration of all conception. That means just like you open the dictionary and you see a word there and you see a meaning for the word. Now imagine you open the dictionary and you don't just see a meaning, you see a geometrical pattern that represents that word. As if every word in the dictionary gets a sort of unique geometrical pattern in accordance to a certain micro-analysis of the words of the letters into like the context and the history. It's as if you see a lot of languages fragmented in accordance to various cultures that came up with the concept. That means it's like whether we like it or not, it's not just like there's a globalization and this fascinating movement of just like there's so human beings are all in the same place. You know what I mean? So what that means is there is inevitable integration. We cannot avoid it. It's like there's too many of us in one place. It's like too many people talking in one room. Eventually, everybody's gonna hear something about something. You know? I find it's the evolution of intuition to the avatar expression of instant action. That means you can say the concept of an avatar was a sort of archetype of no consequence. The past and future were no longer a hassle for the mind. The attention had noticed itself. It doesn't get more divine than that, guys. You know, it's like it's a call of action. I don't know. I just feel it's this massive wave. It's the next renaissance. It's like people realizing, whoa, there's worlds behind our eyes that deserve to be shared. And eventually we developing the academic system appreciates what the mind finds, but does not appreciate what the mind is. And that kind of breaks my heart. That was one thing I noticed. I'm like, does the educational institution kind of show itself as if it's a great place of leadership? And I realized, no. Since the 1900s, it's been kind of like a soldier had to memorize stuff from one bunker and run to the other bunker and exactly repeat it. And that has been the test of ability. Not realizing that it's 8 billion people. It's like every person has a different DNA. Every person has different eyes. Now, of course, you can make such a system so entertaining that people are like, sure, I'll jump on this ship, and they'll get defined by the ship they jump on, right? So it's we have to dare to live in a way where our ancestors may kind of look down on us, but to us it is the new. Or it's like do you want your ancestors to look down on you, or do you want the future generations to look down on you? Yeah. It's tough being an existential creature, guys, you know. You know, I sometimes kind of like let me animate his story right now. It's imagine a person found and like lived a lifetime and was allowed access to paradise, and in paradise found a moment where the person could, in some sense, speak to the voice of God, and the person's like, God, what are you doing with this? It's like, why this? Why a glowing sphere, with many other spheres orbiting around it? Why this game? Why this shape? Why this design? And in that moment, God looks at that person, and the person's wondering, you know, and God says, none of your business. God says, because the ultimate resolve of creation is to be creator, and the ultimate resolve of creator is to be creation. Eventually, the cosmos continues. and various patterns of conscious living come and go. How fascinating. It's like the sun's light beams are entering our eyes, and people are writing bestsellers. Like, people have in some sense brought forth stories of life. There's this Japanese show called Shingeki no Kyojin. Pretty much these giants, humanity's trapped in this kind of behind these giant walls, and outside of those giant walls, there's actually giants who eat people, right? So the whole idea of this is that there's a humanity is like it's like they're not that evolved, and they're just hanging on in there. And what happens is the wall gets broken. And there's a group of people, just think of the concept of this, guys, that there were, instead of like with the military or something, there was a group called the Scout Survey. It was literally, the Survey Corps. What am I saying? It's like, and so the whole idea of this was that it was as if the wings of freedom, that means the willing. It's like if civilization is defined by its members, the members that actually felt like civilization had to have a counterattack. Sometimes it's like, as Shakespeare says, some are born great, some achieve greatness, some have greatness thrust upon them. I think in 2019, 8 billion people have greatness thrust upon them. It's like you have no choice, We have to attend the civilization, this 4 billion-year-old science project. In Zen, they say if you want to climb a mountain, start at the top, which pretty much implies that if you can see yourself not having things or not deserving things, you can simultaneously also be on the top of the mountain, start the climb there. Start the moment with a sort of honest value system internally. And then you won't believe how much it's like you forget about intuition, life begins. There's I was living in a building where a person kind of at 4 a.m. I got a knock, and I realized the person had jumped from the police. It was and I noticed that it was like there was other stories of like years ago, also another incident or something months ago, and I was like, okay, what is this? It's like people are getting fed up with the system. That automatically implies inefficiency. The amount of energy the person has at the end of the day, this is how I know the system is inefficient, because it has room to grow, pretty much. That means if the kind of way the person is living is that they have a lot of energy, like a full battery, and then live the whole day, and at the end of the day they have low, like suddenly the battery is low. So we say, okay, let's consider that the inefficient. How would it be more efficient? And it would be one where the person's energy levels are aligned in a sort of life, you see. So this is the resource of the world moving towards the citizen. It's like I'm getting too into this, but there's hidden treasures behind every person's eyes. You are obligated to find that and share that, because that's just why not? Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I think I'll end the talk here. If the mind can conceive inefficiency, the ultimate inefficiency, it can also consider the ultimate efficiency. The ultimate efficiency has to come from a sort of remembrance. In the yogic practice, they said, go and find your divine remembrance. The yogi would seek that. And that divine remembrance is, to be honest, just the nature of the self. You just have to be simple and to see where the attention lands, in what archetypal position it lands. As if every time the person moves, their thoughts begin hovering in space. The moment they sit down and they are still, suddenly the thoughts kind of are land down with a sort of architecture. Climb the mountain by starting at the top. Be free by being free from the start. Much blessings and namaste.